go ask an engineer friend of yours or a colleague of yours, look, like I need this integration done. Can you do this? Can you look into this? But everything is a big cost. And the engineers in finance is a scarce resource. The nice thing about the copilots is that you can connect tools to copilots using model context protocol in a very quick and dirty way that really speeds things up. And it allows you to also access to certain tools through the copilot in a very intuitive way. Like normally when you integrate something like, I want to be able to send an email to myself in my research interface, like my terminal-like interface. That's quite a bit of engineering work. But now you have this other option, right?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Griswold, Head of Marketing for FINOS. Hope you're doing well. Today with me, I have Ihsan Saracgil, and Ihsan is from OpenBB. He's the CPO there. Hi, Ihsan. How are you?
Good, how are you? Nice being here.
Good. Yeah, no, definitely. I'm glad we're open. I'm glad we are able to get together. I was about to go to OpenBB, but we'll come to OpenBB. We'll come to your role there. And we'll also talk about you speaking at the Open Source and Finance Forum coming up soon in New York. But I wanted to talk to you today and start with you. You're going to be a speaker, and this is the first time that we've had a chance to we've been working in the background with OpenBB for a while within the community, but let's talk about you. Let's talk about what do you do? What do you do as a CPO at OpenBB, and where'd you start as well?
Sounds good. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So right now I'm Chief Product Officer at OpenBB. So what day-to-day that means is I spend a lot of time thinking about AI and data infrastructure for institutional investors. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the product design in that world. My background is mostly data scientist and economist. So I came from that industry. So I think about essentially the research workflow. If you're a researcher in an institutional finance setting or like an investor or whatever that might be, what is your workflow like and where are the biggest pain points and what can we do to solve some of those things? And there's obviously a million things to solve, but specifically what we're focusing on is access to data and having AI access your data. It's like a very specific problem because now it used to be that you only worry about, I'm the consumer of data as a human being. So now I have my AI assistant who needs to consume data on my behalf. Right. And I need to consume whatever he's consuming or regurgitating back at me and things of that nature. So the problem got a little bit more complicated. So this is pretty much what takes a decent amount of my time at OpenBB. So prior to that, I was a chief data scientist at Visible Alpha. So this was another fintech firm that recently got acquired. So there, my job was a little easier, conceptually speaking, because I was only working with data. Like this is pre-AI world pretty much that we worked with. So my job was to take one of the messiest financial data sets that, thousands of millions, perhaps investors rely on. So it comes from the sell side. Sell side is one of the biggest producers of research, even if they're not really recognized as such. Oftentimes, and we always think about academia as the place to do research, but there's actually a whole private industry of doing research for investors. So we were trying to make sense of their data, turn them into essentially data products that people can use in a repeated way for the investment research. So I spend a lot of time trying to build these data products, whether the end user is a quant or a discretionary investor, a hedge fund, asset manager, whatever that might be. And if I go back further, I did PhD in economics at the University of Michigan. So I spend most of my time with models again, but mostly like game theory, portfolio theory, and things of that nature. It gives you a lot of discipline to think in terms of models. So I guess the short story is that we started with thinking in models, but abstract models. So then I moved into data models, and now it's more about platforms essentially, right? So, data models and AI models and how to build these sort of platforms where models exist that everyone puts their own model to consume and come up with their own workflow. So that's been my journey so far.
Okay. Yeah, but cool. And so can you speak a little bit about OpenBB as well? Because I know, is it Didier Lopez? Is that the creator of it? I remember some of the story of it. He started something that it was more like a pet project and then put it out there. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about, maybe a little bit about the genesis of OpenBB and what actually happens there. Why did it catch on so quickly too? And as far as hub stars and I just remember that there's a pretty good story behind it, but I don't know what the story is.
Yeah. So I'm not going to be able to do the same kind of justice that DDA could, but I'll give you my version of it because it's interesting from my perspective. Because when this project first came out, so it was an open source project that DDA started, but a couple other contributors eventually joined. Some of them still work for OpenBB today. So today, it's actually the most popular active Git repository on their finance topic. Like it's pretty much the big shebang, I would say, in the open source side of things. So now there's also a non-open source, more commercial side of it that's not so much relevant for, at least for today's conversation or my upcoming talk at FINOS. So it started as this open source project where DDA was essentially trying to put together all the different pieces. He's an engineer, he's not an investor, so he didn't have that kind of background. So sometimes it's good because you're a bit of an outsider. So remember, this is 2021, meme stock craze was going on. There's all these individual investors going after big institutional investors like Citadel at the time and things of that nature. If you remember the GameStonk saga, the meme stocks and all that good stuff. So this is when it started. So someone like DDA was like a very sharp engineer, being a bit of an outsider, tried to like, okay, so I need to know a lot of different things. I need to collect all sorts of different pieces of the puzzle into a single platform where I can see what's happening and things of that nature. So he tried to come up with a very fresh approach. How would I solve this without looking at these institutional tools that are out there that's selling for like tens of thousands of dollars? So that's like the starting point of it. Like it was originally called GameStonk Terminal.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it caught, like it got a lot of interest, obviously, during that time because like all of these things were going viral. And the funny thing is that actually at the time I was working at Visible Alpha, essentially backed by all these big name firms and everyone was using us. Like, and then all of a sudden there's this open source project. I actually looked in at the time because I heard about, I thought it was a joke, like GameStop Terminal as an alternative to Bloomberg Terminal. Like, but I was just curious. So I actually run it. I saw it at the time. I thought it was cool, but I didn't think too much about it at the time and I moved on. So for an interesting turn of events, I ended up working for them eventually. But there comes a certain point where it caught on as a project, and then open source focused investors started looking at it, and then said basically there was this revelation that, look, this is a lot of potential. This is actually solving some important problem in the industry. So maybe it's time to essentially start taking it a bit more seriously and approach it more like try to develop into a more commercial open source project. And that took of his own journey. So today we still maintain the open source project that didn't disappear, but it transformed essentially into something new that is going to be the subject of my talk at FINOS.
Okay, let's actually get into that. Open Data Platform by OpenBB, connecting financial data to AI securely, locally, and on your terms. That's the name of your talk. What does that all mean?
Yeah, cool. So I actually used the conference to how to introduce this project to the world. So this open source repository that we talked about, so this is the next chapter of it, if that's the right way to put it. So what Open Data Platform is going to do is that it's going to solve one of the biggest pain points that I talked through early on, and which centers around essentially the data engineering part of getting data to wherever it is that you're consuming that data. So that could be, it used to be, right, like spreadsheets, then dashboards, so on the notebook, some sort of coding environment. And now there's copilots also, right? So we're using all of these different tools in any kind of professional financial money management setting. Everyone has their own hacky solution, essentially like you're gluing, because you're consuming data from lots of different ways. Firms have different levels of skill. So everyone is essentially coming up with some sort of either, I don't want to say hacky, but glued together, proprietary, a way that only makes sense to you and that firm type of solution. Sometimes people also buy a lot of solutions, but when you buy solutions from other vendors, it's hard to customize them. And then you can rack up big bills fairly easily. So you see that like large firms, they spend a lot of money on infrastructure because they can. It's actually one of the biggest cost items after labor, essentially, to run a hedge fund. You're spending a lot of CapEx on this type of thing. So everyone's solution only makes sense to them or its closed form in some shape or form. So we wanted to come up with a solution that is open, easily extendable. It's Python native, modern. And here's one of the key things about it. It's local first, right?
Mm.
So nothing phone zone. There's no telemetry. No one is trying to look into your usage data to understand what are you cooking. You manage your own credentials and execution. Everything is under your control. And that's actually quite interesting. Like we were even debating whether you should be creating an account to use this tool, for example. It's like in today's world where everyone is asking you to your phone number, your email, because you want
Right.
to buy batteries at a store. We're
Right.
talking about essentially giving you a tool where we don't want to do what you're trying to do. It's like we want to give you that kind of tool because privacy and security, like these are big deal in the world of hedge funds. Like everyone is like almost paranoid about these things. So this is
Yep.
potentially a good alternative. It allows you to essentially standardize and unify all these disparate data sources that you're dealing with. Like we're using Fast API, Open API specs, or help you essentially get everything that you have into the same spec. And you can basically just manage all your environments from the single the single application. So if anyone works as a data engineer, there's this terminal hell. Everything is running on a separate terminal, also on a different machine, just to check your logs is work. So we essentially built the open data platform in a way that all of these things are just consolidated into one application that you need to look into. It's designed to help you run things locally, observe what is going on, and just basically apply the same standard to every backend service that you want to serve to someone downstream as like a financial researcher. Like they don't need to know where this is coming from, but you have a single source of truth and a very good open source tool that you can manage that entire pipeline. So
Okay.
we thought that this sort of open source project didn't exist, and it's potentially a very good alternative to all the commercial or the hacky solutions that people have out there. It doesn't have to be the complete solution, but it could be one part of the solution for a lot of investors.
Cool. So, what do you think that somebody who comes to your talk, what do you think they're going to walk away with right after the session? Or is there anything that they could actually apply to the next day as they're rolling into work?
Yeah, so I think the easiest would be, and I can tell from my own experience, right? I'm not an engineer by trade, but I spend a lot of time in my job previous to OpenBB, like running into these engineering issues and essentially guide the engineers about I'm the downstream user. I want to make sure that things are very reliable and things of that nature for my research to work and stable and things of that nature. It was a bit of a revelation to me when I saw some of these projects is that, look, like there's actually an open source alternative. It doesn't cost anything. We don't charge for open data platform. You can create your own extensions and essentially run all of those data pipelines effectively in a laptop. Like
Mhm.
this is amazing, right? So we always think about these hedge funds you need to spend millions of dollars and to get the infrastructure right. This is part of that infrastructure. With all that compute power that is now available is so cheap. Now you also have this open source tool to manage some of your data pipelines. A lot like you can get an almost professional level hedge fund data pipeline management using these tools on your laptop. And you can do it tomorrow. This is open source. You just download it and just try a few of these things. And then you can do it right after the call. I think that's actually pretty big progress. That was unimaginable for a upstart investor, a startup hedge fund back in the
Yeah.
day.
Wow. That is pretty cool. And like I said, Gab Columbro, RED, has been talking about OpenBB for a while. So it's interesting now to understand some of the intricacies, words failing me today, of what's behind your project there. And so that's pretty cool. And so definitely visit Ihsan's talk. But I know you wanted to talk a little bit further than just what your talk is about as well. And what kind of matters to you beyond this talk, whether it's future focusing or just cool within open source within finance, or what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I guess something that is not part of my talk, but it is, I guess, like something that we're seeing in the industry as like one of the interesting new tools, smaller context protocol, and how it could potentially change like how we work with data.
Yeah.
So this is where AI data it goes into that same kind of theme. We decided to include some support for model context protocols in open data platform. It wasn't originally designed for that purpose, but we thought that it could actually be quite helpful in that context too. So let me first tell you like what is MCP or model context protocol and why this is relevant. It's going to be a lot more relevant in the future, we believe. So think of, we've been talking about APIs for decades. That's relatively well understood. So just think of it as the client of an API was a developer. Historically, that's how people think about things. But now just imagine that you, the end client itself is my AI copilot. It's not me. You just need an API that can speak with my copilot and I interface that copilot. So what is an API for that would look like? So that's like where model context protocol comes in. It's an API they are built for LLMs specifically. There is, so what you're excited about for the future, putting aside all that engineering speak, which I'm not anyway, just thinking about the end user, the investor's perspective, when you want to integrate something to your product, to your workflow and things of that nature, like you always go ask an engineer friend of yours or a colleague of yours, look, like I need this integration done. Can you do this? Can you look into this? But everything has a big cost. And the engineers in finance is a scarce resource. The nice thing about the copilots is that you can connect tools to copilots using model context protocol in a very quick and dirty way that really speeds things up. And it allows you to also access to certain tools through the copilot in a very intuitive way. Like normally when you integrate something like, I want to be able to send an email to myself in my research interface, like my terminal-like interface. That's quite a bit of engineering work. But now you have this other option, right? So I have this copilot in that workspace, and I just need to give it a Gmail model context protocol that would allow that copilot to use that tool to ask what I'm asking it to do. So that actually saves a lot of engineering hours because then you don't need to build these deep integrations and things of that nature. And we see that there's a lot of potential here with the speed of integration and the cost of integration going down. Like a lot of end users like myself, still relatively techy ones, right, can actually achieve a lot without bothering their engineering colleagues quite a bit. But then you need standards for this thing too. And so that's like where open data platform is a little bit like futuristic already, because we're going to be including this support in to how to run your backend, for instance, that you've already designed for the more traditional API route. You can also run it as an MCP server using open data platform and connect it to a copilot. So these things are quite exciting, right? Like we are only scratching the surface of what you can achieve by working with data in the following way. And it's an exciting area. Every day we're hearing people with new ideas that didn't exist like 6 months ago.
Totally agree. And I will say too that we track, I don't know if I told you, but I've been doing conferences, tech conferences, open source conferences for about 16, 17 years now. And so it's very interesting to, not saying buzzwords, but interesting to hear the themes that come out each year. And obviously, like 3-4 years ago, everything was around Log4j and then issues with CVEs and everything like that. And then boom, OpenAI bursts on the scene and everything's about AI. And then we go from AI to agents. And then now I think too, like you're bringing something that, is on the forefront, I think right now, and we're just getting into it with the MCPs too, that like we're about to accelerate into protocols that we have to have in order to deal with these things that are moving so fast that, like you said, ideas weren't even, the companies that are being made now, the ideas weren't even available, or the tooling wasn't even available to do them 9 months ago, like you said. And that's incredible evolution that we have of 5 million years of human race getting up to here. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's just, it's a cliff that we've been climbing. So yeah, I think you're right. The MCP that's the next thing that we've got to tackle as a technological society that then unleashes the next thing, right? Whatever the hell that is.
Whatever the hell that is, I don't know. So I have worked. So as of my talk at the Open Source Finance Conference, I will be less than a year, technically full-time employee of OpenBB. And it feels like a lifetime already. I remember when MCP came out, we looked into it and said, I don't know what this is. And we
Right.
ignored it. And then everyone started talking about it. We started looking a bit more carefully. And then here we are. Now we're releasing a feature. All of this happened within 1 year. Just think about that. Like, this is potentially a big, we don't know. Obviously, it's speculative, but
Right.
it is an innovation. That's an innovation with potentially very big upside that happened within 1 year. I'm working at this firm. It came out, we made sense of it, and we're releasing a feature on it. And it's now also even available in open source in less than a year. Like, it's crazy speed that things are going right now.
Yeah. Keep on top of it, because that's your job as chief product officer.
Yep.
Know all the things that are coming down the road, I'm sure. But no, looking forward to meeting you in person. And I think Didier is going to be there as well. I saw.
Yep.
I see when people register. I was happy to see him there. And Open Source and Finance Forum, October 21st, 22nd. Ihsan is going to be speaking on Wednesday, October 22nd at 11:10 a.m. And it's Open Data Platform by OpenBB, connecting financial data to AI securely, locally, and on your terms. Thanks, man, for spending some time with me. I appreciate it.
Likewise.
And yeah, join us at the conference, join Ihsan's talk. And with that, I'm going to say good day, good night, wherever you are.